My name is Lauren Parker. I'm 29 years old, and during what I thought would be a routine Sunday family dinner at my parents' elegant suburban home in Westchester, surrounded by the comfortable warmth of our weekly tradition that had brought us together for years, my father Douglas suddenly looked directly at me across the polished mahogany dining table and asked in a confused, increasingly agitated voice that cut through the pleasant conversation like a knife, "Lauren, the $200,000 I've been giving you over the past 8 months, where exactly is that money? And why haven't you used it to buy a house or start your veterinary practice like we discussed?" The question hit me like a physical blow because I had never received a single penny of the money he was describing, leaving me stammering in complete confusion, while my sister Vanessa's face turned completely white with panic, her wine glass trembling in her hand as she realized that her sophisticated financial fraud was about to be exposed in the most devastating way possible. What none of us knew was that Douglas's innocent question would trigger the exposure of the most elaborate family financial deception any of us could have imagined, ultimately destroying Vanessa's entire luxury lifestyle empire that had been built on systematic theft and revealing that her successful lifestyle blogger image, complete with designer clothes, exotic vacations, and social media influence, had been completely funded by money stolen from our father's generous attempts to help his modest daughter achieve her professional dreams of opening her own veterinary practice and finally escaping the paycheck-to-paycheck existence that had defined her entire adult life. I had always been the simple daughter in our family, the one who chose to work with animals instead of pursuing wealth or social status like my older sister Vanessa, finding genuine fulfillment in my job as a veterinary technician at Compassionate Care Animal Hospital, where I helped heal sick pets, comfort-worried owners who brought their beloved companions for medical treatment, and learned the intricate details of animal medicine while earning a modest income that barely covered my basic living expenses. My annual salary of $35,000 was barely enough to cover rent on my small studio apartment in a converted basement that smelled faintly of dampness, despite my best efforts with air fresheners and dehumidifiers, student loan payments from veterinary school that consumed nearly $800 per month, basic living expenses like groceries and utilities that required careful budgeting and coupon clipping, and the occasional emergency that seemed to arise whenever I thought I was finally getting ahead. Financially, like the time my ancient Honda Civic needed a new transmission that cost more than I had in my savings account. The choice to pursue veterinary medicine instead of a more lucrative career had been conscious and deliberate, driven by childhood experiences volunteering at the county animal shelter, where I had witnessed the incredible bond between pets and their human families during both joyful adoption moments and heartbreaking medical crises that taught me about unconditional love, loyalty, and the healing power of compassion for all living beings who depended on human kindness and medical expertise for their survival and comfort. While my sister Vanessa had always been drawn to glamorous careers and lifestyle pursuits that generated social media attention, brand partnerships, and financial rewards that allowed her to travel the world and purchase luxury items that she documented extensively on Instagram and her lifestyle blog, I had been content to build my life around meaningful work that provided emotional satisfaction rather than material wealth or public recognition, even though it meant living in a tiny apartment and carefully monitoring every dollar I spent. My parents, Douglas and Martha Parker, were financially comfortable retirees who had built substantial savings through Douglas's successful 30-year career as a corporate attorney specializing in mergers and acquisitions for major companies, and Martha's 25-year career as a real estate agent who had developed expertise in luxury properties and high-end residential sales that generated significant commissions during the housing boom years. Their combined professional success had allowed them to live in an upscale neighborhood featuring manicured lawns, elegant homes, and the kind of quiet prosperity that characterized successful suburban professionals, while maintaining diversified investment portfolios, substantial retirement accounts, and the financial security that enabled them to help their adult children when significant financial needs arose, or when opportunities presented themselves for advancing our career goals and personal development. They had always been supportive of my career choice despite understanding that veterinary work would never provide the kind of income that would allow for luxury lifestyle or rapid wealth accumulation. And they had occasionally offered small financial assistance when I faced unexpected expenses like emergency car repairs, medical bills that exceeded my health insurance coverage, or professional development opportunities like continuing education courses that could advance my skills but required registration fees that strained my modest budget beyond its limits. "We're proud that you chose a career based on your passion for helping animals," Martha had often said during our family conversations about work and life goals, usually while we were cleaning up after our Sunday dinners. "Even though we know it means you'll always have to be careful about money and probably won't be able to afford the same lifestyle that other people your age might enjoy, like buying houses or taking expensive vacations." The acknowledgement of my financial limitations was said with love and without judgment, but it also reflected the family's understanding that my modest income would require careful budgeting and occasional family assistance during emergencies or major life transitions like buying a home, starting my own veterinary practice, or pursuing advanced certifications that could improve my earning potential while allowing me to provide better care for the animals and pet owners who depended on my expertise and compassion. My relationship with my sister Vanessa had always been complicated by our dramatically different approaches to money, career, and lifestyle choices, with her pursuing increasingly expensive tastes and social media prominence while I maintained simple living focused on work satisfaction rather than material accumulation or public recognition that required constant content creation and brand relationship management. Vanessa Parker, who was 32 years old and 3 years my senior, had built what appeared to be a highly successful lifestyle blog called Vanessa's Luxe Life that showcased expensive fashion purchases from designer brands like Chanel and Louis Vuitton, exotic travel destinations including month-long trips to European capitals and tropical resort locations, luxury dining experiences at Michelin-starred restaurants that cost more per meal than I spent on groceries in a week, and high-end beauty products and cosmetic treatments that she claimed to afford through blog sponsorships, affiliate marketing commissions, and brand partnership deals that had supposedly made her digital platform profitable enough to support her glamorous lifestyle while building a substantial following of readers who aspired to similar luxury and sophistication. "My blog is finally generating serious income," Vanessa would announce during our family gatherings, displaying designer handbags that cost more than my monthly rent, expensive jewelry that sparkled under the dining room chandelier, or glossy photos from recent trips to Paris, Rome, or the Maldives that seemed far beyond what most lifestyle bloggers could afford, unless they had massive audiences or major corporate sponsorships. And luxury brands are paying premium rates for sponsored content. Because my engagement rates are consistently high and my audience demographic is exactly what high-end companies want to reach when they're launching new products or expanding into new markets. The explanations of her blog's financial success always sounded plausible and were supported by professional-looking website design that featured high-quality photography, polished social media content that demonstrated sophisticated understanding of visual aesthetics and marketing principles, and the visible evidence of her luxury purchases and lifestyle experiences that she documented extensively across Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, and her main blog platform with daily posts that generated hundreds of comments and thousands of shares from followers who admired her apparent business success and envied her glamorous lifestyle. Our parents were impressed by Vanessa's apparent business acumen and her ability to monetize her interests in fashion, travel, and luxury lifestyle content, treating her financial success as evidence of entrepreneurial skill and modern digital marketing expertise that they didn't fully understand, but clearly respected and celebrated during family conversations about our respective careers and achievements. "Vanessa has built something really impressive with her blog," Douglas would say with obvious pride during our Sunday dinners, often while Vanessa showed us photos from her latest sponsored trip or displayed a new designer purchase. "And she understands digital marketing and social media business models better than people our age could ever hope to grasp. She's positioned herself perfectly for the modern economy, where traditional career paths are being replaced by entrepreneurial opportunities that didn't exist when we were starting our professional lives. The parental approval and admiration for Vanessa's apparent success was never accompanied by criticism of my more modest lifestyle, but it created a family dynamic where she was viewed as the financially sophisticated daughter who had mastered modern business principles, while I was seen as someone who needed guidance and assistance with money management, despite my responsible handling of limited resources and consistent payment of all my bills and obligations without ever asking for financial help except during genuine emergencies. But beyond the obvious lifestyle differences that were visible during family gatherings and social media posts, what concerned me most about Vanessa's apparent wealth was the mathematical impossibility of funding her expensive tastes through blog income alone, since I had researched lifestyle blogger earnings extensively when considering whether digital marketing might provide supplemental income for my veterinary work. And I understood that even successful blogs with substantial followings rarely generated enough revenue to support the kind of luxury spending that Vanessa displayed regularly on her social media accounts and during family gatherings where she would casually mention $5,000 shopping sprees at high-end boutiques, $10,000 vacation expenses for single trips, or monthly lifestyle costs that exceeded most people's entire annual salaries. How exactly does your blog generate enough income to afford all these expensive purchases? I had asked Vanessa during one family dinner, where she was showing off a $3,000 Hermes handbag and describing her plans for a $15,000 vacation to Dubai. Because most lifestyle bloggers I've read about in industry publications struggle to make even $30,000 annually, unless they have massive followings in the hundreds of thousands or major corporate sponsorships from companies like Nike or Apple that pay enormous fees for product placement. Vanessa's response to my questions about her income sources was always vague and defensive, focusing on general concepts about diversified revenue streams, premium brand partnerships, and exclusive affiliate arrangements, without providing specific details about sponsorship rates, commission percentages, or the actual financial mechanisms that supposedly supported her luxury lifestyle while maintaining the blog as her sole source of income. "You don't understand how modern influencer marketing works," Vanessa would reply dismissively, often with a condescending tone that suggested my questions revealed ignorance about digital business models, and successful bloggers don't share specific financial details because it affects negotiating power with brands and creates competitive disadvantages in the marketplace where other influencers might undercut your rates or steal your brand relationships. The explanations were sophisticated enough to sound credible, while remaining vague enough to avoid scrutiny, and our parents seemed satisfied with Vanessa's general descriptions of blog profitability, without pressing for the kind of detailed financial information that would have revealed the impossibility of funding her lifestyle through legitimate blogging income, especially given that her follower count, while respectable, was nowhere near the massive audience that would be required to generate the kind of revenue that could support monthly expenses exceeding $20,000 for luxury purchases, travel, and lifestyle maintenance. But what I didn't understand at the time was that Vanessa's financial success was indeed impossible to achieve through blogging alone, and that her luxury lifestyle was being funded through systematic theft from our father's generous attempts to provide me with financial support for achieving my professional dreams and personal goals, including the down payment assistance for a house that would allow me to escape my cramped rental apartment and the startup capital for an independent veterinary practice that would let me serve pet owners with compassionate, affordable care, while building the kind of professional independence that had seemed financially impossible on my modest technician salary. Have you ever lived modestly while watching a family member display unexplained wealth that seemed impossible given their known income sources, making you question your own financial choices while wondering if you were missing some obvious opportunity for generating substantial income? That's exactly what I experienced for years as Vanessa's lifestyle became increasingly expensive and extravagant, while her explanations for her financial success became more vague and defensive whenever anyone questioned the mathematics of her apparent blog profitability. or asked for specific details about the business model that supposedly supported her luxury purchases and glamorous travel schedule. The family dinner that would change everything began as a routine Sunday meal at our parents' beautifully appointed home in Westchester County, with the familiar rhythm of casual conversation about work developments, current events, and family updates, while we enjoyed Martha's excellent cooking and the comfortable family atmosphere that had characterized these weekly gatherings for years, providing stability and connection that had helped maintain our relationships despite our different lifestyle choices and career paths. Douglas and Martha had prepared a special dinner featuring my favorite foods: herb-crusted salmon with roasted vegetables, wild rice pilaf, and homemade dinner rolls that filled the house with comforting aromas. And the conversation was pleasant and relaxed, as we caught up on recent developments in everyone's lives and enjoyed the kind of quality family time that had always been important to all of us, despite our different approaches to money, work, and personal fulfillment. "Lauren, how are things going at the animal clinic?" Martha asked as we settled in with our main course, her voice reflecting genuine interest in my work and professional development. "Are you still enjoying the collaboration with Dr. Chen and the other veterinarians? And have you given any more thought to the independent practice ideas we discussed a few months ago when you mentioned your long-term career goals?" The question about my professional aspirations was familiar and encouraging, reflecting my parents' ongoing support for my career development, despite their understanding of the substantial financial challenges associated with starting an independent veterinary practice, which typically requires significant startup, capital for medical equipment, facility rental, professional insurance, business licensing, staff salaries, and all the overhead expenses associated with running a medical practice that serves both routine wellness care and emergency medical situations. "I love the work at the clinic," I replied enthusiastically. "And I'm learning so much from Dr. Chen and the other veterinarians there about advanced surgical techniques, diagnostic procedures, and practice management. But starting my own clinic still feels financially impossible given the startup costs that could easily exceed $300,000 and the risk of leaving a steady paycheck to build a client base from scratch while competing with established practices that have years of reputation and referral relationships." The admission of financial limitations was honest but not discouraging, since I had found deep satisfaction in my current position while maintaining long-term goals about eventually opening my own clinic when the financial circumstances became more favorable, possibly through business loans, investor partnerships, or the kind of family financial assistance that could make independent practice feasible without creating unsustainable debt or financial risk that could destroy my personal economic security. But Douglas's response to my comment about financial limitations was completely unexpected and would trigger the revelation that would expose Vanessa's systematic theft and destroy our family's understanding of who we really were beneath the surface appearances and assumptions we had all accepted for years, without questioning the source of apparent prosperity that seemed inconsistent with known income sources. "Lauren, I don't understand why you're still worried about startup costs," Douglas said, his voice reflecting genuine confusion and growing concern as he set down his fork and focused entirely on our conversation. "Given the substantial financial support I've been providing specifically to help you buy a house and start your veterinary practice, the $200,000 I've transferred to your dedicated account over the past 8 months should be more than sufficient for a substantial down payment on a suitable property and comprehensive business startup costs that would allow you to open a well-equipped clinic without the kind of debt burden that might compromise your financial security." The words hit me like a physical blow because I had never received any financial transfers from my father, never seen any unusual deposits in my modest checking account that rarely contained more than a few $100s after monthly expenses, and never been aware that he was planning to provide such generous support for my professional and personal goals through systematic financial transfers that he apparently believed had been reaching me successfully for months. The amount he mentioned, $200,000, was more money than I had ever possessed or even imagined having access to, representing nearly 6 years of my current salary and enough resources to completely transform my financial situation, eliminate my student loan debt, purchase a decent house with space for a home office, and establish the kind of independent veterinary practice that had been my professional dream since graduating from veterinary school, but had seemed financially impossible given my modest income and lack of access to substantial business capital. "Dad, I haven't received any money from you," I said, my voice reflecting the confusion and shock I was experiencing as I tried to process his claim about financial transfers that had never appeared in my bank account. "My checking account has never had any unusual deposits, and I've never seen anything approaching $200,000 in my financial records. I still have the same small savings account with about $2,000 that I've been trying to build up for emergencies, and I've never received any communication from banks about new accounts or investment vehicles that might contain substantial deposits." The statement created immediate tension at the dinner table as Douglas's confusion shifted to alarm, and Martha stopped eating to focus entirely on our conversation, clearly sensing that something serious was wrong with the financial arrangements that Douglas had apparently been making for months without my knowledge or awareness, while Vanessa had become completely silent and was staring at her plate with unusual intensity. But the most telling reaction came from Vanessa, whose face had turned completely white and whose hands were visibly shaking as she struggled to maintain composure, while the conversation revealed that Douglas's generous financial support for me had somehow gone missing, creating the terrifying possibility that her luxury lifestyle might be connected to the disappearance of funds that had been intended for her sister's benefit and professional development. "Lauren, that's impossible," Douglas said, his voice becoming more agitated as he processed my denial of receiving the financial transfers, pulling out his smartphone to access his banking applications. "I've been making monthly deposits of $25,000 to your account since last spring, and the total amount is approaching $200,000 that was specifically designated to help you achieve financial security and professional independence without the burden of business loans or mortgage debt that might compromise your ability to serve pet owners who need affordable veterinary care." The escalation in Douglas's voice reflected his growing understanding that something had gone seriously wrong with his financial support system, and his eyes were beginning to focus on Vanessa with the kind of suspicion that suggested he was starting to make connections between her unexplained wealth and my apparent failure to receive the generous support he had been providing through what he believed were secure and properly managed financial channels. "Vanessa," Douglas said, turning his attention to my sister, whose panic was becoming increasingly obvious despite her attempts to maintain normal dinner conversation and avoid drawing attention to her emotional state. "You've been helping me with the financial transfers to Lauren's accounts through the investment management system you recommended, and you assured me that everything was being handled properly through the sophisticated financial instruments that would provide tax advantages while ensuring Lauren had access to funds when she was ready to make major purchases." The revelation that Vanessa had been involved in managing the financial transfers intended for me was the first piece of evidence that would ultimately expose the sophisticated fraud scheme she had developed to steal our father's generous support while maintaining her luxury lifestyle through systematic deception, document forgery, and identity theft that had allowed her to redirect substantial sums of money to accounts she controlled and used for personal expenses. "I'm sure it's just a processing delay or a banking error," Vanessa said, her voice higher and more strained than usual, her hands continuing to shake as she reached for her water glass. "And these kinds of large financial transfers sometimes take time to appear in accounts, especially when they're being managed through complex investment vehicles that require multiple approvals, verification steps, and coordination between different financial institutions." But Vanessa's explanation was immediately contradicted by Douglas's access to his comprehensive banking records on his smartphone, which showed that all transfers had been completed successfully months earlier, and that the designated receiving accounts had confirmed receipt of the funds and had been active throughout the entire transfer period, eliminating any possibility that processing delays, banking errors, or institutional complications could explain my complete failure to receive the intended financial support. The banking records show that all transfers were completed successfully, Douglas announced, his voice reflecting growing alarm and suspicion as he reviewed months of transaction data. And the receiving accounts have been active and accessible throughout the entire transfer period, with regular activity and balance confirmations that indicate the money is definitely somewhere, just not where it was supposed to be for Lauren's benefit. The confirmation that the money had been successfully transferred but had not reached my account created the undeniable conclusion that someone had intercepted the funds through fraud, deception, or systematic theft. And Douglas's growing focus on Vanessa suggested that his trust in her financial management assistance was being rapidly replaced by suspicion about her role in the disappearance of my financial support, and the possibility that her luxury lifestyle was connected to money that should have been helping me achieve my professional dreams. Vanessa, I need you to show me immediately all the account documentation you used to set up Lauren's financial transfers, Douglas demanded, his attorney's training taking over as he began to approach the situation as a potential case of financial fraud, rather than a family misunderstanding or banking error. And I want to see all the paperwork, account agreements, signature verification materials, and institutional confirmations that were used to establish these accounts and authorize these substantial transfers. The demand for comprehensive documentation was the moment when Vanessa's elaborate fraud scheme began to collapse, because she had created fake accounts using forged signatures, fictitious account numbers, and non-existent financial institutions to redirect our father's generous support to accounts she controlled, while maintaining the appearance of legitimate financial management conducted on my behalf, with my full knowledge and authorization. Have you ever watched a family member's face turn white with panic when they realized their sophisticated criminal deception was about to be exposed in front of everyone they had been lying to for months? That's exactly what I witnessed as Vanessa understood that Douglas's innocent question about my use of financial support was going to reveal that she had been systematically stealing money intended for my professional development, while I struggled with modest living expenses and believed my dreams of practice ownership were financially impossible. The exposure of Vanessa's systematic theft began when Douglas's careful examination of the account documentation that she had provided over many months revealed obvious forgeries, fake account numbers that didn't correspond to legitimate financial institutions, and signatures that bore no resemblance to my actual handwriting, creating undeniable evidence that she had been stealing our father's generous support through sophisticated identity theft and document fraud, while I remained completely unaware that such substantial financial assistance was being provided for my benefit. These signatures don't match Lauren's handwriting at all, Douglas announced as he examined the account opening documents that Vanessa had provided to establish what she claimed were investment accounts and financial management vehicles designed for my benefit. And when I call these account numbers, I'm getting recordings saying the numbers are not in service or are associated with different account holders entirely. The systematic document analysis was revealing comprehensive fraud that had been carefully planned and executed over many months, with Vanessa creating sophisticated deception materials, including fake bank letterheads, forged signature cards, fictitious account agreements, and fabricated investment documentation that had convinced our father that his financial support was reaching me through legitimate channels, when it was actually being diverted to personal accounts that she controlled and used exclusively for funding her luxury lifestyle and social media success. I can explain everything, Vanessa said desperately, her voice becoming more panicked as she realized that her elaborate deception was collapsing in real time. There were some complications with the original account setup procedures, and I had to create temporary holding accounts while the permanent investment vehicles were being established through the complex approval processes that these sophisticated financial instruments require. But all the money is completely safe and will be transferred to Lauren as soon as the final paperwork is processed and approved by the relevant institutions. But Vanessa's frantic explanations were systematically contradicted by Douglas's methodical investigation that revealed the temporary holding accounts were actually personal accounts in her name at different banks, and that the financial transfers intended for my benefit had been methodically deposited into accounts that she had used to fund designer purchases, luxury travel, expensive dining, premium beauty treatments, and all the lifestyle elements that had created her successful blogger image while I remained completely unaware that such substantial support was available. "These aren't temporary holding accounts," Douglas said, his voice filled with anger and betrayal as he understood the magnitude of Vanessa's deception and the sophistication of her fraud scheme. "These are your personal accounts at Chase Bank and Bank of America, and you've been systematically stealing money that was specifically intended to help Lauren buy a house and start her veterinary practice, while she's been living in a basement apartment and struggling to pay basic living expenses." The confrontation was devastating for our entire family, as we realized that Vanessa's apparent business success, luxury lifestyle, and social media influence had been completely fabricated, using money stolen from our father's generous attempts to provide me with the financial security and professional opportunities that could have transformed my circumstances years earlier if the funds had reached their intended destination. "Vanessa, how could you steal from your own sister?" Martha asked, her voice filled with shock, disappointment, and disbelief, as she understood that one daughter had been systematically robbing the other while maintaining family relationships built on lies, deception, and criminal fraud. "And how could you watch Lauren struggle with money problems when you had access to funds that were specifically intended to help her achieve her dreams?" But Vanessa's response revealed the depth of her entitlement, lack of remorse, and fundamental inability to understand the criminality of her actions, or the devastating impact her fraud had created for both me and our father, who had been deceived into believing that his generosity was helping one daughter, while it was actually funding the other daughter's completely artificial lifestyle built on theft and deception. "I wasn't stealing," Vanessa claimed, her voice becoming defensive and desperate as she tried to maintain some semblance of justification for her criminal behavior. "I was managing the money more effectively than Lauren could have, investing it in my blog business and social media platform development that would eventually generate enough income to return all the borrowed funds with interest. But that process just took longer than expected and required more capital investment than originally projected." The characterization of systematic theft as money management and borrowing revealed that Vanessa still didn't understand the criminality of her actions, the violation of family trust, or the devastating impact her fraud had created for everyone involved, including the financial institution relationships that had been compromised by her use of forged documents and fictitious account information. But Douglas was no longer interested in Vanessa's explanations or justifications, and his attorney's training was guiding him toward a systematic investigation of the fraud that would reveal the complete scope of her criminal activity and the total amount of money that had been stolen from accounts intended for my benefit. "Show me every transaction, every account, every purchase that was made with Lauren's money," Douglas demanded, his voice reflecting the controlled anger of someone who understood they had been systematically deceived by a family member they had trusted completely. "Because I'm going to recover every penny that was stolen, and I'm going to ensure that appropriate legal consequences result from this betrayal of family trust and criminal fraud." The comprehensive financial investigation that followed revealed that Vanessa had stolen not just the $200,000 that Douglas had intended for my benefit, but additional funds that she had accessed through credit cards opened in my name, small business loans that she had obtained using my identity and employment information, and other financial instruments that had created substantial debt obligations that could have destroyed my credit rating and created legal liability that I was completely unaware of. "She's been using your social security number and employment information to obtain credit cards and small business loans," Douglas announced after several hours of investigation with banking representatives and credit reporting agencies. "And the total amount of identity theft and financial fraud exceeds $250,000 when you include all the credit instruments and loan obligations that were created without your knowledge or authorization." The revelation that Vanessa's fraud extended beyond the obvious theft of intended gifts to include identity theft, credit fraud, and potential legal obligations that could have affected my financial future for years was the final confirmation that her criminal behavior required law enforcement involvement, rather than family resolution or private restitution arrangements. "Dad, I think you need to contact the police immediately," I said, making the difficult but necessary choice to support law enforcement involvement rather than trying to resolve the situation through family discussion and private financial arrangements. Because this isn't just a misunderstanding or poor financial management. This is systematic fraud that involved identity theft, document forgery, and criminal deception that could have destroyed my credit rating and created legal problems that I would have been responsible for resolving. The decision to recommend police involvement was emotionally difficult but practically necessary, since Vanessa's fraud had included criminal elements that extended far beyond simple family financial disputes and created potential legal liability for me if the forged accounts, falsified loan applications, and identity theft were discovered by financial institutions, credit reporting agencies, or tax authorities during routine audits or credit checks. Douglas's response was immediate and decisive, reflecting his professional understanding of financial fraud, identity theft, and the importance of addressing criminal behavior through appropriate legal channels rather than enabling continued deception through family protection that could create liability for other family members or prevent appropriate consequences for sophisticated criminal activity. "You're absolutely right," Douglas said, already reaching for his phone to contact law enforcement. "This is serious criminal fraud that involves identity theft, document forgery, and systematic deception that needs to be investigated and prosecuted appropriately, regardless of family relationships that might complicate our emotional responses to Vanessa's behavior." But Martha's reaction was more conflicted, reflecting the natural parental desire to protect children from serious consequences, while also acknowledging that Vanessa's behavior had been unacceptable, harmful, and criminal in ways that affected other family members who deserved justice, restitution, and protection from future fraud. "Maybe we can handle this privately," Martha suggested, her voice filled with the kind of desperate hope that characterizes parents who want to believe that family problems can be resolved without external intervention, and work out some kind of comprehensive repayment plan that would restore Lauren's money and repair the identity theft without involving law enforcement and creating criminal records that would affect Vanessa's future opportunities. The suggestion of private resolution was understandable but impractical, since Vanessa had spent the vast majority of the stolen money on lifestyle expenses, luxury purchases, and travel that couldn't be easily liquidated for restitution. And since the sophistication of her fraud scheme suggested that private accountability would be insufficient to prevent future deception or address the legal complications created by identity theft and credit fraud. "Mom, she stole over $250,000 and created forged documents using my personal information," I replied, trying to help Martha understand the magnitude of criminal activity that had occurred. "And if we handle this privately, there's no guarantee that she won't commit similar fraud in the future when she faces financial pressure or wants to maintain the lifestyle she's become accustomed to through stolen money." The argument for law enforcement involvement was strengthened by Vanessa's continued attempts to justify her behavior, minimize the criminal nature of her actions, and avoid taking full responsibility for the systematic deception that had affected multiple family members and created potential legal problems that extended far beyond simple financial disputes. When Douglas called the police to report the comprehensive financial fraud, identity theft, and systematic deception that Vanessa had committed over many months, her panic escalated to desperate attempts to negotiate some kind of family resolution that would allow her to avoid criminal prosecution while providing partial restitution for the stolen funds. But her proposals revealed that she had spent the vast majority of the money and would be unable to provide immediate or complete repayment. "I can give back about $50,000 right now," Vanessa offered frantically, "and I'll sign a legally binding promissory note for the rest of the money that can be paid back over time as my blog generates more revenue, and I can liquidate some of my possessions that were purchased with the investment funds." But the offer of partial immediate restitution only confirmed that she had indeed stolen and spent the vast majority of our father's generous financial support, and that her luxury lifestyle had been entirely dependent on continued access to funds that didn't belong to her, while her blog income was apparently insufficient to support even basic living expenses without supplemental funding from criminal activity. "Where is the other $200,000? Douglas demanded, his voice reflecting the controlled fury of someone who had been systematically deceived by a family member he had trusted completely. "And how can you possibly repay that amount when your blog income is apparently insufficient to support your current lifestyle without stealing from family members?" The question exposed the fundamental unsustainability of Vanessa's financial situation and the likelihood that she would be unable to provide full restitution regardless of legal agreements, family arrangements, or promissory notes, making criminal prosecution the most appropriate response to ensure accountability, prevent future fraud, and protect other potential victims from similar deception. The arrival of police investigators at our family dinner table was surreal, devastating, and emotionally overwhelming, but also necessary for addressing the sophisticated fraud that Vanessa had committed while maintaining family relationships and social media success that had been built entirely on money, stolen from our father's generous attempts to help me achieve financial security and professional independence that had seemed impossible on my modest veterinary technician salary. Detective Sarah Martinez was professional, thorough, and experienced in investigating financial crimes, examining the forged documents, fake account information, fraudulent loan applications, and comprehensive banking records that revealed the systematic nature of Vanessa's theft and the criminal sophistication of her deception methods that had successfully fooled our father for many months. "This is a clear case of identity theft, financial fraud, embezzlement, and systematic deception," Detective Martinez explained, as she documented the extensive evidence of criminal activity. "And the amount involved, over $250,000, combined with the sophistication of the fraud scheme, makes this a serious felony case that will be prosecuted to the full extent of the law, regardless of family relationships, personal circumstances, or emotional appeals for leniency." The confirmation that Vanessa's actions constituted multiple serious felony charges was sobering for our entire family, but it also provided official validation that her behavior had been genuinely criminal rather than just poor judgment, family financial mismanagement, or ethical lapses that could be resolved through private discussion and restitution arrangements. "We'll need to seize any assets that were purchased with the stolen funds," Detective Martinez continued, "including designer clothing, luxury accessories, expensive electronics, vehicles, and anything else that can be traced to the fraudulent accounts and used for victim restitution and evidence in the criminal prosecution." The asset seizure process began immediately, with investigators systematically documenting and removing designer handbags, expensive jewelry, luxury clothing, high-end electronics, and other lifestyle items that had been purchased with money stolen from our father's intended financial support for my housing needs and veterinary practice goals. Watching Vanessa's entire luxury lifestyle being dismantled in real time was both satisfying and heartbreaking, as it revealed the complete artificiality of her social media success, while also demonstrating the devastating consequences of criminal behavior that had seemed profitable and sustainable until the fraud was discovered, investigated, and prosecuted by law enforcement authorities who understood the seriousness of financial crimes and identity theft. "My entire blog success was built on stolen money," Vanessa finally admitted as investigators methodically cataloged her possessions for evidence and restitution. "And I don't know how I'm going to maintain my social media presence or lifestyle without access to funds that I can't legitimately afford on actual blog income that's probably less than $1,000 per month." The admission of complete financial dependence on stolen funds was the final confirmation that her apparent business success had been entirely fraudulent, and that her lifestyle blogger image, social media influence, and professional reputation would collapse along with her access to money that had never rightfully belonged to her. But the most satisfying aspect of the investigation was learning that I would finally receive the financial support our father had always intended to provide. allowing me to pursue the professional dreams that had seemed financially impossible while Vanessa was systematically stealing the resources that could have transformed my circumstances years earlier if the funds had reached their intended destination. The aftermath of Vanessa's arrest and comprehensive prosecution was swift, devastating, and comprehensive, with criminal charges that included identity theft, financial fraud, embezzlement, forgery, and systematic deception, resulting in felony convictions that would create permanent legal consequences while ensuring that she faced appropriate accountability for stealing money that was specifically intended to help me achieve financial security and professional independence. The criminal case proceeded rapidly due to the overwhelming evidence of systematic fraud, comprehensive documentation of stolen funds, and Vanessa's eventual admission of guilt when faced with irrefutable proof of her criminal activity, ultimately resulting in a plea agreement that included 3 years in state prison, 5 years of probation, complete restitution of all stolen funds plus interest and penalties, and permanent criminal records that would affect her future employment and financial opportunities. Your sister will serve her full sentence without possibility of early release, Prosecutor James Wilson explained during our final meeting about the criminal case, and she'll be required to make complete restitution of $250,000 plus additional penalties, interest, and legal costs that reflect the seriousness of her crimes against family trust and financial institutions. But beyond the criminal consequences, Vanessa's social media empire collapsed completely when her followers learned that her luxury lifestyle had been funded entirely by money stolen from her father's generous support for her sister, creating exactly the kind of scandal that destroys influencer credibility, ends brand partnership opportunities permanently, and eliminates any possibility of rebuilding professional reputation in the digital marketing industry. The social media backlash was immediate, devastating, and permanent, with followers expressing outrage about her deceptive lifestyle, while brands terminated existing partnerships and demanded return of payments for sponsored content that had been created using fraudulent financial resources that belonged to other family members. Her follower count dropped by over 80% within the first week after news of her arrest became public, Martha reported sadly, and all her remaining social media accounts have been flooded with negative comments about her fraud, theft from family members, and the complete artificiality of her supposed business success. The destruction of Vanessa's online presence and professional reputation was appropriate consequences for building social media success through systematic criminal activity, though it also represented the permanent elimination of any legitimate income source she might have developed if she had focused on authentic content creation rather than theft and deception. Meanwhile, I finally received the financial support that Douglas had always intended to provide, allowing me to leave my cramped basement apartment for a beautiful house with space for the home veterinary office I had always dreamed of creating, and to begin serious planning for the independent practice that would serve pet owners who needed compassionate, affordable care for their beloved animal companions. I want you to know how incredibly proud we are of your honesty and integrity during this difficult situation, Douglas said as we finalized the financial transfers that would transform my professional and personal circumstances, and how profoundly sorry we are that Vanessa's systematic deception prevented you from receiving this support years earlier, when it could have helped you avoid so much financial struggle and professional limitation. The delayed financial support was genuinely life-changing and deeply appreciated. But the most meaningful aspect of the entire situation was understanding that my parents finally recognized my authentic character and personal integrity in stark contrast to the deception, criminality, and betrayal that had characterized Vanessa's approach to money, family relationships, and professional success. The independent veterinary practice I opened with Douglas's generous financial support became exactly what I had envisioned for years. A compassionate, affordable clinic that served pet owners who needed quality medical care for their animal companions, without the prohibitively high costs that often prevented people from seeking appropriate treatment for sick or injured pets, who depended on human care and medical expertise for their survival and comfort. Dr. Parker, Thank you so much for making veterinary care affordable and accessible for families like ours, one client said during our first month of operation. Our dog's emergency surgery would have cost twice as much at other clinics in the area, and your flexible payment plan made it possible for us to get him the immediate treatment he needed to save his life. The professional satisfaction of helping animals while serving families who struggled with veterinary costs was everything I had hoped for when I chose this career path years earlier. And Douglas's financial support had made it possible to achieve dreams that had seemed impossible, while Vanessa was stealing the resources that were specifically intended to help me build the kind of practice that could serve both my professional goals and my community's needs. But the most important outcome wasn't financial. It was the understanding that authentic character, honest work, and genuine integrity create lasting value that can't be counterfeited, stolen, or artificially manufactured, while fraudulent success built on criminal activity ultimately collapses when the deception is discovered and prosecuted through appropriate legal channels. The family relationships that survived Vanessa's criminal betrayal were stronger, more honest, and more meaningful than anything we had experienced before the fraud was exposed, built on mutual respect, genuine trust, and authentic support rather than the manipulation, deception, and systematic theft that had characterized her interactions with people who loved and trusted her, despite her criminal behavior. If you're reading this and you're dealing with family members whose apparent success seems mathematically impossible given their known income sources, please trust your instincts and consider the possibility that their wealth might be built on deception, criminal activity, or systematic theft that affects other family members who deserve protection, support, and justice. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is to expose criminal behavior rather than enabling continued fraud through silence, protection, and family loyalty that allows harmful patterns to continue affecting innocent victims who deserve restitution and appropriate legal consequences for people who betray fundamental trust. Stolen wealth may create temporary luxury, social media success, and the appearance of business accomplishment, but authentic character, honest work, and genuine integrity create lasting value, meaningful relationships, and genuine satisfaction that can't be taken away by criminals or counterfeited by people who prioritize appearance over substance. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and share your experiences in the comments below. Have you ever discovered that a family member's apparent wealth was built on money they stole from you or other relatives? How did you handle the difficult choice between family loyalty and seeking justice for financial crimes that affected your own life, opportunities, and professional dreams? Your story might help someone else who's facing similar situations and needs to understand that exposing family fraud is sometimes necessary for protecting innocent victims and ensuring appropriate consequences for criminal behavior that violates fundamental trust and family relationships. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember that your authentic character is worth more than any stolen luxury, and that honest work creates the kind of lasting value that can't be taken away by criminals or counterfeited by people who prioritize temporary success over genuine integrity and family loyalty. See you in our next story here on Her Sweet Revenge.